in spending time, an excerpt from the novel Igneograph, Athens 2020. Tim pushed through the audience, wedging between throbbing skinheads, all in the pink and blue neon. All were foreign, no face, her face, no shoulders, her shoulders. Where had she gone? Tim started to shout, but he knew not the name to call out. What was her name? He never met. They never even learned what their names were. So he just shouted swear words and obscenities, pushing and shoving and driving, feeling the impetuous resistance of the crowd as he kept sinking into it. No dirty looks, no angry punches. They only reciprocated Tim's thrusts of helpless rage, transferred to everybody else. This additive anger, the mosh pit, more vicious. And then finally, one person, she punched him in the kidney. He folded. Her hands were on his cheek suddenly. "It's you, I'm sorry," she shouted. Tim coughed, but righted himself. "Listen." "Well, of course I'm listening," she yelled back. "This music is so loud." No, I'm only..." But he grabbed her hands. "Listen, you don't know how much you've helped me." She grinned. "Tell me your name." "Boyana Ignatova," she shouted, and Boyana kept on grinning. "Boyana!" And Tim took a face. "Thank you. I love you." Like this?
Yeah.
"Hi, guys." Where was I? The secret was gone from her lips. But her face then. He knew, and she knew it too, in her wide eyes. He spoke into her ear. "I've never, ever done that to a stranger." Even though it was the first time he'd ever actually approached a woman at all. But he continued. "I've never met someone this intense. I'm terrified of you. Take me to your house. Anywhere. I need you. Right now." Boyana stared at Tim with bewilderment, flushing in her eyes and cheeks, but her lips returned to that cool mien, and she pulled away. "No man has ever been so forward with me." "Yes," Tim shouted, and he grinned. Boyana didn't walk away, and she paused. "Brush your goddamn mouth," she yelled at him. "Yes!" She pushed through the pulsing horde, disappearing. Tim closed his eyes, laughing and laughing. But what could he do? He ceded to the multitude surging without control, this band's invocation of the most evocative rock song ever written. Tim wasn't disappointed, though. He was free. He was released by Boyana Ignatova to make direction. His future was now his, and someone grabbed him by the collar. "Why the fuck are you still standing here?" she shouted, and hauled him through the fray toward the exit. Then they began spending time together. So suddenly Tim couldn't remember how they'd started. They spent time together at a tangle of arms, pressing into the wet brick wall outside Novatrova, pink and blue neon, and their eyes glistening in the sweat, pressing into bricks, rolling across them, rolling tongues and arms and legs and backs. Boyana pressed Tim into the wall, grabbing him by the hair, cocking his head back, a kiss, a suck on the neck, and he winced. He pulled her away. Something like the first heat. Not the water moment, but a fire in his chest. His veins engulfed, and he pushed her hard into the wall and pulled her neck, her shirt, her breasts. She pulled away, and in the middle of the street, they spent time wordlessly pulling and groping and pushing each other away in cycles, stumbling endless forward as bitches in the wind. The heat in their bodies too much, the cold of the night too much, forth and back, no way to rest the mass, slipping with the friction of what wants and what cannot have, all walking towards somewhere else unknown. So much burning, can't stop touching, can't stop the pulling and the fawning, the restless urgency, the need to be both closer and further away. Sodom was alive and well and roaming the earth drunk in Athens. They spent time sitting in the stairwell of his hotel, their hands wandering across muscle and scar tissue and hair and sweat-covered skin canvases. He found a place at the top of her thigh, that smooth space and bone where he lingered there, and he pressed, and it made her push her face into his and run her fingers through his hair and across his chest, both of them sinking into the stairs, everything sinking. They spent time inside the room, against the door, so much pressure, unable to not stay, unable to feel it, the difference from one or the other. And they spent time kissing and feeling it all, spent time fumbling with the lapel, the button, the zipper, spent all the time falling into bed, and they spent time making love. No, sort of. No, not love. They spent time making hands to fingers to legs, intertwining in time to push and pull into her. Hard rolling, slow writhing, sharp whispers, pained inhaling, slow nails over stalks, never taking faces apart, never breaking apart until there finally they'd both come. And he fell back, and there was nothing left but to fall apart and rest. Sort of. No, they spent very little time at rest. Very little time. Because then Tim woke up. It was only a few minutes later. Then Tim remembered his own name and remembered Boyana's name. But something else happened. Boyana saw Tim sit up, and a newly risen sun but saw it in his eyes. She saw the draw of that demon thing, the empty space. Space between empty eyes staring at a flat sun. The way the sun made the dark in his pupils lighter, the film on his eyes a dust as if he were already dead, or the revelation that these were eyes of any other animal outside the humanizing context of personhood. Something else about it. She felt, and she hadn't felt this way in years. She knew what it was to starve to death, with the years of longing and either feel a secret agony or nothing, only to have the empty thing awaken again and want to die once more or end the cycle early with a pistol or an overdose of something too strong but once loved for its distance and finally embracing it for permanently closing that distance. So, Boyana showed Tim she knew the demon thing too, the endless need. She took him over, firmly by the arm. "Fuck me," she told him. "However you want. Do anything you want. Hold nothing back, nothing. And then I'm going to fuck you." Incredulous he was, wide eyes, fearful open mouth as he always had been. So she slapped him hard across the face. They spent time fucking each other. He spent time fucking her first as she prescribed. He stopped pretending, stopped doing what he thought he should do, and just started doing what he wanted to do. He pulled her up from the bed with a twist, hands on her wrists, and started pressing her down face first. Then he started muttering urgent things like, "Now spread your pussy, now suck my cock, now lick your tits, now spread ass, God, fuck, shit, hell, cunt." Of course he called everything by its vulgar name, and he muttered these things as hushed obscenities, pushing himself in and out with slow, deliberate mouth breathing, moaning control sort of at first, but forgetting, and then just fucking as hard as he could anywhere with abandon against the wall until he fell back, finally, out of this orgasm as if being punched out by a glacier cold seizure. If you were around in these moments, for whatever reason, and you asked him who he was, or where he was, he'd have no idea. He'd drool at you like a brain-fried dog. If you likewise asked him which year it was, or which empire it was, or which century it was, or which species he was, or which planet we're on, he'd similarly only stare at you with an open mouth, eliciting some sunken moans before falling back slowly and staring up into the sky as a dying but smiling fish, all mammalian aspects off his arms out, the years of restraint and rage and difference pumped completely from him through his cock. "Now it's my turn," Boyana said. So, then she spent her time fucking him. She took her sweet fucking time fucking him. Fulfilling an old fantasy she'd have of enslaving a man and using him up in a fancy hotel room over the course of an afternoon. This wasn't the fanciest room, but it would do. It would do. She found the champagne and the chocolate the hotel had left in the room, set them beside the nightstand. "Say nothing for the next 3 hours," she told him. "Pour me a glass," she told him. "Feed me a truffle," she told him. "Keep your hands behind your back and suck on my fingers," she told him. "Suck on my toes," she told him. "Give me a sip." "Keep your hands behind your back and lick me," she told him. And she laid him back as a spread eagle until he had licked every single inch of her body. "Feed me a truffle, give me a sip, give me a sip, give me a sip." "Keep your hands behind your back and eat me," she told him, and she sat, controlled his head while he performed, controlling with his hair, slapping him once, choking him until he turned red and coughed. She enjoyed that look, kind of. The complete absence in his face, the acceptance he had that she was using him, a now blissful emptiness, and it helped her bring her to climax. So she said, "Feed me a truffle, give me a sip, give me a sip." "Keep your hands behind your back, open your mouth," she told him, and poured half a bottle of champagne in his mouth. Him gubbling, coughing, choking, bubbles dribbling. She found new places for 4 fingers. Then she decided to please him. Pushed him to the floor, held his face down, sat behind, and worked him to orgasm with such a tight-fisted motion he sobbed like every time he'd ever cried and ever come alone, or ever cried and come alone at the same time, and finally it shot through him all at once. But then after that, they did spend some time in a rest, a heap on the hotel floor, drenched, breathless, and finished. After all that, he sighed, and he could only say yes, yes, yes. Tim and Boyana spent time resting until Boyana eventually stirred, rising and dressing in the afternoon to go. He touched his hand to her thigh, but the look she gave him, he knew. "See you later." That's all she said, but he knew it was a question and a statement. Tim wasted enough time that afternoon until dinner time. He was hardly hungry, could barely bring himself to eat the olives and the cheese and the peppers, the fish, could drink the wine but couldn't feel anything but zeal and fire. Tim wasted time, and he wasted his dinner until the sun had set. The Acropolis had been illuminated by bonfires. and he could see the room and wander the winding streets again. On the second night, he felt like he'd known. Boyana was waiting for him there, sipping her absinthe, and bartenders and staff continued to sweep up the previous night's glass, scrub the dried mud and beer and blood. "Hello, Boyana," Tim said. She had been watching him since he walked through the door, eyes stony, green discuses, face unchanging, always holding that secret. This is how they spent their time together on the second night, the third night, the fourth, and untold others, just like they'd spent it on the first, always stumbling back to this room, always siphoning into the empty thing, always sobbing as he came, always fading into the sunrise, Boyana rising to leave, Tim wasting time until dinner, and the two of them always finding that same exact place again, to meet. Always, until they could no longer count the nights that they'd met together. At least 20, 25, 40. They spent all of their time together in this way until Tim had spent all his money. He couldn't afford the hotel again. This surprised him. He'd learned he spent all his money only when the rotund innkeeper handed his credit card back to process his weekly payment. "Decline," the innkeeper said. "Yes." Tim didn't flinch. "Yes. Yes, excuse me." He spent a minute or two shoving his clothes back into the backpack, the artifacts, the bracelets, the book, the things that would fit. He rolled everything into a wet bath towel. He threw them out the window. The towel splayed out just one story down, the clothes fluttering into the evening breeze, and trinkets falling and shattering on cobblestones. He hesitated, but then he threw his backpack out the window as well. The innkeeper was already staring at Tim. He rounded the corner, eyes sunk into deep-parted circles, leaning on the front desk with expectation, and Tim just laughed. Yes, I've got to go to the bank, you see. The bank is burned down." Yes. Tim started to walk. He halted. "Oh, the other bank." He walked backwards toward the door. "My bank is the other bank." He spent time squinting, gathering his strewn clothes from the street, bundling them up, carrying them with his backpack to Novitrova, where Boyana was waiting for him, as she had been all those nights. "Hello, Boyana," Tim said. "Boyana, I spent all of my money." Her face never changed. She swilled her drink, stood from the bar stool, took Tim's towel-bundled clothes under one arm. "Let's go home."